A most significant judgment on one of Donald Trump's most significant policies. What he did was to impose these tariffs. He called it the most beautiful word in the English language. Hugely controversial on legal grounds, clearly, and it was challenged through the courts, and it's ended up in a Supreme Court where he has a Conservative majority, and this has long been seen as a test of his presidential power. He imposed tariffs on countries across the board. There were a number of reasons for these tariffs, but essentially countries, trading partners of the US, they face at least a 10% tariff paid by the importer of goods. This was Donald Trump's big plan to reduce inflation, to deliver on his cost of living promises to the American people. But what he did was to use this Emergency Powers Act, essentially declaring an emergency on trade deficit. Unilaterally, he said this was going to happen. And his opponent said, well, hang on a minute. Actually, what you're doing is raising taxes. And that is a job for Congress. The Supreme Court has agreed with that argument on the face of it. And it's a huge blow to Donald Trump, not just in terms of the nuts and bolts of that economic policy, but also to his stature as president, because so much was riding on that. And it does bring into question other areas where he has enacted executive power, which is also contested. Donald Trump, before this judgment was made, he was saying it was going to be the Supreme Court's most important judgment ever. He said the US would be screwed if the court ruled against the legality. Said the US might have to refund trillions to companies and different countries, creating, as he called it, a complete mess. And that's the question now. How big a mess is this, and how much will the United States have to pay out to companies who have had to pay as a result of these tariffs deemed illegal? As of late last year, there was something like $100 billion that had been pulled in on tariffs. That's the question. How much of that has to be paid back to the people who channeled those payments to the United States Treasury? The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, prior to this announcement or this judgment, he was saying that there are workarounds, that there are other areas of the law that the United States can look to cement the tariff policy. I suppose it remains to be seen what these are and how effective that can be as a backup plan. But a huge blow to Donald Trump, for whom so much was riding on this in terms of economics, money to his treasury, and the tariff policy that was front and center of the way this president does business. The Supreme Court is telling him it's not going to fly. And of course, that does have implications on so many different areas for Donald Trump.
Just stay with us for 1 second, James, because we want to just bring you the very latest from Donald Trump. Actually, yesterday he was speaking on this issue, and he talks about it a lot, doesn't he? He was hitting out the decision to try and block his tariff policy in court. This is, of course, before the decision broke, suggesting that anyone who was against tariffs was doing the bidding of China. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We have to be between the Supreme Court with China-centric people suing us, people from China suing us. They're all China-centric, and people from outside of our country, to get rid of tariffs, and it's making our country rich, and it's a disgrace that we even have to talk about this subject. The tariff is the greatest thing that's happened to this country. We're making a fortune, but more importantly, all of these factories are booming now, and they were all dead. All right, I hope you take it down. I hope you show them that we have to be, seriously, that we have to be before the Supreme Court of the United States to justify tariffs, which are making every one of these businesses thrive. And without them, all these buildings are closed, like they have been before I got here.